Hello, everyone. Thank you for tuning in to hear what is an energy code anyway, otherwise known as Energy Code 101. And the reason why we say 101 is because there will be a 201, which I will touch on briefly at the very end of this presentation. You are listening to What is an Energy Code Anyway for Policymakers, which is a high-level overview of the energy code, why it is, how it came about, what it's addressing, plus several other points that I intend to cover today. Which, speaking of, our agenda will be a brief introduction of Metropolitan Energy Center. I'm also going to introduce our main project that we're working on currently, Building U. And then we'll go into the energy code origins, just why have it, what are the benefits, what's in them, what does it cover, brief history and types of buildings, and then we'll just go into quick summary and a preview of what comes next. Metropolitan Energy Center. We've been around in our region for a while. We serve the entire Kansas City metropolitan area across the state line. And we have two main programs, building performance and sustainable transportation. We're 41 plus year old. In fact, we're turning 42 later on this year. And we've basically been around working in energy efficiency space, both for buildings and transportations, for the duration of our existence. Just briefly introduce the transportation and then move on because I'm mostly talking about buildings. But the transportation program at Metropolitan Energy Center provides a lot of great service, especially in helping support infrastructure transfer over into electrical vehicle related work, plus some alternative fuel information and research. But we have several projects, just as an example here. We have helped install, our transportation department has vehicle charging stations in rural Kansas and Missouri, as well as urban infrastructure such as Kansas City street light charging station infrastructure implementation. Metropolitan Energy Center, instead of infrastructure, does a lot more information, data research, sharing, and helping people that want to understand best practices in building their buildings or renovating their buildings to being more efficient. We're here to help. And we don't do this work solo. We rely on many partners in the region. For example, we work with Children's Mercy Hospital of Kansas City, helping teach their Healthy Home program information on where the intersection of energy efficiency meets occupancy health, for one. We do quite a bit of building code official training and contractor training on building codes and building performance best practices. And we work with municipalities both on education like this one, but also facilitating policy. So for example, the city of Kansas City, Missouri relies on our help desk to help private building owners submit their energy and water information into the city for that benchmarking ordinance, which is active policy in the Kansas City, Missouri area. And for example, Kansas City entities also like to use our demonstration home project Living Proof for tours on residential building best practices. And if you're interested in a tour of our best practice project Living Proof demonstration home, please let me know and we can schedule a tour. Okay, I want to mention Building U, though I'm not going to go into a lot of specifics about it. This is our jobs training program project that we have embarked on. We embarked on it starting in 2024 to train labor in this industry on energy efficiency vocation specifically, but we hope it'll be so much more for the entire industry. Like I said, we're a workforce development initiative, and we want to connect not just the industry with this new vocational workforce that will be able to support both building code departments and the construction and designer in the construction industry with energy vocational labor, like doing testing of the buildings that is now required, infiltration and duct testing, which is required in Kansas City, Missouri. But many of our trainees may be interested in other subcontracting professions like plumbing, electrical, and framing. And so as we start to train this workforce, those that want to go into these energy efficiency vocations will have an avenue to do so. We're working on getting many employers set up. But for those that may decide after they take the training that they'd be more interested in swinging a hammer, we have several partners that are going to help us get them into that line of work potentially. We have roughly about 30 partners in this group, and this jobs training program is for any residents in Kansas and Missouri across both states that would be interested in getting into construction or interested in getting into the energy efficiency vocations. Please go to our Building New website for further information or reach out to me after this presentation. I'd be happy to help you. Okay, but let's get into why you're here. What is an energy code? Well, it's more than just words on a page. This is the set of rules that govern energy use of the building through standardized building practices and components, also known as the model code. Specifically, the code that I'm going to be speaking to today is released by the International Energy Conservation Council, and the IECC comes out every 3 years, and it sets the minimum energy standard for new construction. So sounds kind of weird, but it is the worst home that can be built. The policy is the baseline, and energy code, if enacted for cities as it's written, as the model code exists in each iteration, again, comes out every 3 years. The latest was just published, the 2024 International Energy Conservation Code. And if that is adopted, that set will be the baseline for new builds. And the energy code is indeed more than just addressing how much energy you're saving on your bills. I like to call it, in fact, I like to opine that it should be called the Health and Safety Code permanently, because it really does interact with all building systems and components and impacts occupancy health. It focuses on a lot of indoor environmental aspects of our lives: thermal comfort, natural and artificial lighting, ventilation, and really is a key component to keeping the air we breathe healthy and clear. Energy codes really do touch much of the rest of the building features. So unlike other codes that, like the electrical code, just addresses electrical work, energy code can impact what other subcontractors are doing or required to do in the envelope. So, the framing, the foundation, the design of the attic and ceiling, your heating and cooling equipment, of course. Electrical wiring is impacted by some items that are in the energy code. The concrete that goes into your foundation, and then, of course, making sure that our buildings are well insulated, well air sealed, and using the right ventilation to create that healthy indoor air quality I discussed earlier. And I want to just touch on briefly that building performance is based on science. We also call it building science. And these principles come from physics. And one of the main first laws in physics and laws of thermodynamics is that heat transfer goes in one direction. What do I mean by that? Well, hot, which for the sake of this presentation, heat and high energy are interchangeable synonymously, and it only moves in one direction, from hot to cold. So if this sort of like square dumb ball was in the vacuum of space and just existed, the heat would move over to the cold side until it was this square dumbbell is all the same temperature. Well, we don't live in a vacuum, and so with our buildings, heat is either trying to transfer inside or outside of the envelope, out in through the walls, depending on what the season is. So in the winter, that heat is trying to escape out to the cold. And the speed of transfer depends on the materials of that the wall is made out of. Um, Never in the opposite direction. You're never going to have cold trying to go to hot. That is not the science. On the heat transfer with a wall, for example, as this is illustrating, Energy Code is built around the science of controlling this transfer in the wall, ceiling, and foundation for just one aspect. And we call the effectiveness of the insulation that goes into the walls R value classification. The higher, the more thermally insulated your wall will be. The illustration here on the right is just showing that an uninsulated wall with a very big arrow means that heat can transfer out of it very quickly. When you insert insulation into a wall, it slows it down. So if there is a temperature difference on either side of the wall, the heat is going to try to move to the colder side of the wall. Nobody can stop heat transfer unless you're a rocket scientist that needs to keep in the air while you're in space. Everybody else is just concentrated. A building scientist are just trying to slow that transfer of heat through the wall. And again, we use this through modern technology of insulation materials and then other building features, which brings me to the model code and the note that these building codes are designed to be adopted as a package, not as a cafe sheet to pick and choose which ones you think you want to keep and which ones you want to sort of jettison off the page. For example, more insulation and higher window values, better, more efficient windows mean that you can have a smaller heating equipment. That very much directly correlates with your heating and cooling equipment on how thermally insulated your building's envelope is. If you pay attention to duct and air sealing, the way it's written in the code, you can adopt heat pump technology and that will be used more effectively. So for example, just an anecdote here. I've talked with lots of people that call Metropolitan Energy Center to ask us about heating and cooling equipment. Heat pumps, electric air source heat pumps are sort of the thing right now that everybody is talking about, the new technology, the fact that they're better at heating in the winter in our climate. But what people don't realize, especially if you are installing a high efficient heating and air conditioning equipment like an air source heat pump without air sealing the envelope first and without making sure that your ducts are sealed, like if you have exposed ducts in the basement and ducts in the attic, if you don't make sure that they are well sealed, you have to think of air as a fluid like you do water. We need to think of our ducts as keeping in the fluid of air because that air has been paid very expensive dollars to heat and cool. And a heat pump doesn't really operate very well because it's heating the house in the winter with more sort of body or room temperature air rather than a furnace, which is heating it with very high heat gas. And you're not going to get the efficient effectiveness without making sure your ductwork is extremely tight. I've been waxing on about this because many of our duct testing requirements traditionally in our region have been amended out of the energy code. And it's just critical as we talk more and more about electrification and moving to heat pump technology that we make sure that these building code, energy code packages are addressing the need of residents as they change over to this equipment. So in summary, why energy codes are important. Yes, they reduce energy for the lifetime of the building. And speaking of lifetime, it's more cost effective to implement energy efficiency measures at the time of the initial construction versus waiting, just building minimum to a minimum standard and saying that you can retrofit later. Well, that just ignores the fact that retrofits cost way more money than building new more effectively. It reduced the cost of ownership, and I'm not just talking about on the energy bills, but maintenance has been proven to be impacted by when you actually are implementing better building code policy. You now see that your maintenance costs actually decrease, not just the amount of energy that you're using, as a matter of course. I've mentioned the health aspect. That indoor air quality is improved when you have better building code. um, Mold growth, reduces fire hazards, many benefits. And when building and design professionals get into the same room, as is needed when you have sort of a whole building approach where everybody can talk to each other and learn how the different systems are going to interact with each other, it provides the opportunity to learn and utilize new construction and new technologies. Um, as I've mentioned, a lot of cities in our region have amended their code to date, with the exception of Kansas City, Missouri, which is now in the 2021 IECC. Many of our municipalities are on the 2018, but they're on a heavily amended 2018 code, especially on the residential side, to a 2009 equivalent, basically. And so that means that we're stuck in the 2009 technological world, so to speak. And by not adopting the codes as they increase in efficiency, it means that you're basically miring the region in older technology to be used in the construction process rather than what's available and better, based on what we know now in 2025. I mentioned occupancy health, and we actually have a report that proves the correlation between occupancy health and energy efficiency improvements. This is Weatherization's impact on pediatric asthma patients, a white paper and report that was published roughly a year and a half ago under collaboration between Metropolitan Energy Center, Children's Mercy Hospital of Kansas City, and University of Missouri of Kansas City, who penned the report using Metropolitan Energy Center's data on over 6,000 addresses that were weatherized, Metropolitan Energy Center facilitated, and then the pediatric asthma patient data from Children's Mercy Hospital. A statistical analysis was done, and University of Missouri of Kansas City found that there was a 34% drop in asthma frequency, like the attacks, the frequency of the attacks, and then also the intensity of the asthma itself. Asthma is graded on a scale kind of like burns are, with a scale of intense asthma becoming more intense, in different stages. And this report showed that in the homes that were weatherized, and mostly this would be retrofitting and adding better insulation and more insulation to older homes, doing more intense air sealing again to make sure that we're patching up leaks so the house isn't as drafty, and also duct sealing. A lot of duct sealing was done in these homes, and 34% betterment was achieved with, again, these children that lived in these homes that were actually weatherized. And this was in comparison with a control group of children in the same time frame in homes that weren't weatherized. This report can be found at Metropolitan Energy Center's website. Really goes into great detail on demographics, we have some age criteria that we also compared it to the age of the home, and by the region of the city of these different neighborhoods. I invite you to go take a look at it. I also want to make note that the US government, within the last several years, realized that better buildings are actually better for our infrastructure and country's health overall. The Federal Emergency Management Agency, otherwise known as FEMA, released a new building code strategy in 2022 to acknowledge that there are three core goals and that the building standards, the model energy code that FEMA relies on, can help when they are responding to natural disasters, and then help prevent some of the hardship that happens after the natural weather disasters go through an area. So their goals were to integrate building codes and standards across FEMA to speak to the benefit of better building code policy. They wanted to strengthen the nationwide capability, excuse me, of building better buildings that are going to withstand these extreme weather events, and train people on the why, kind of what we're doing now. What's the benefit? And as building codes improve from state to state or region to region, as is the case in Kansas City, they are putting out information and more research that shows that people can stay in buildings for longer and more healthily, sitting out, electrical outages, while extreme temperatures on the outside. They can stay in those buildings longer on the inside, even when the power goes out. Just the last couple of notes. The International Energy Conservation Code is one way to build commercial buildings, especially. So we have, like I said, the additions coming out every 3 years, and there's a residential standard and a commercial standard. Commercial buildings can also use the ASHRAE 90.1 standard to address the energy attributes in their buildings. I know that Kansas City, Missouri asks for, at time of permit, commercial building developers to pick whether they want to use the IECC commercial building book, or they want to use the ASHRAE 90.1. And note that when you do look at the type of buildings that are impacted by this, residential code is, of course, addressing single family homes, but it also addresses what would be larger buildings, multifamily buildings, 3 stories or less. You're still going to build to the residential code. On the commercial side, of course, non-residential buildings are covered by that, but also residential buildings of 3 stories, or excuse me, 4 stories or higher are going to be using the commercial code IECC standard. And both codes, of course, are addressing new construction, new buildings. Existing buildings do start to be covered by new building code when they're actually gutted for like major gut rehab, will be addressed by the new building codes. And the IECC does have sections in their books that do address existing buildings and what exceptions there may be, even during a gut rehab process, as you're using the new building code policy. So I hope you've enjoyed this presentation, because we will have another one soon on what is an energy code anyway 201, energy code 201. And this is going to go into greater depth about what the different definitions are of some of the more commonly used phrases. We're going to have a comparison between what is in the policy between the 3 most recent iterations, 2018, 2021, and 2024. We're going to go into one of the energy vocations that we're actually training on and building new, the HERS rater, and HERS stands for Home Energy Rating System. It's kind of funny, HERS rater is Home Energy Rating System rater. So we're going to go into the detail on that because it's so important. Again, this is an energy vocation that needs to be a household name, kind of like carpenter or plumber. It really is the subcontractor that tests the building and makes sure that the insulation and the air sealing and the duct sealing are all done to code and done again to impact resiliency of the building and comfort and health of the building occupants. And that concludes my presentation. I invite you to email me any questions you may have, or you can also, if you're a policy person and you want to know more about just policy advocacy in general, through Metropolitan Energy Center, our policy manager is Austin Taylor, and there is his email information as well. Thank you so much for coming to our presentation, and I bid you a good day.